Hi, it's Jo from Minerva. I'm back with my last sew along from McCall's 7322. McCall's 7322 is a top pattern for jersey or woven knits. It's not often you find a pattern that's versatile with both, but this is a jersey version that I've got on now. This is view F and it's got a slash neck and 3/4 length sleeves. And today I'm going to make view C, which is short sleeved with a wider facing that's sewn down. I'm going to assume today that in the sew along that you have some sewing knowledge, so I'll be just going through the key points of putting together view C from McCall 7322. The fabric I'm using today is a Minerva exclusive viscose jersey. It's got lots of stretch and it's really slinky and beautiful to wear against the skin. This is the cross grain. When you bring the selvages together, then you'll get the straight grain, which has got slightly less stretch. So you need to make sure that you cut your body going across the cross grain. This fabric is also from the exclusive viscose jersey range, so check out the whole range on our website. The sizing is quite free and easy on this pattern, so this is a medium and I would say it's quite a large fit. I'm a 36 upper bust and that's where you want to measure for this pattern, because if you measure for a full bust you will get a really big shoulder as well. So unless you need the full frame, it's better to measure your upper bust. With a fabric as stretchy as this, you're going to get plenty of stretch and ease around the biceps and on the hips. We're going to head over to the cutting table and take a look at cutting out this slinky viscose jersey. It will depend what size you are cutting, but I've managed to cut a small or a medium I could get on the fabric folded into the centre. So there's the one selvage, there's the other, and I've used the pattern to make sure that I've got the grain line. It's quite slinky to cut out, so make sure you've pinned it down well. Don't forget to mark your notches so you know which is the front and the back, the shoulder notch and the side notch. And you'll also need to be cutting the centre front and the centre fold on the fold line. It's a really long line top. If you look at the picture on the front cover, you can see it's got a really long line body. You can change that. There is a lengthen and shorten line on the top, and the waistline is indicated, so you can find your waist and alter it from there. It's tricky if you're cutting a slinky jersey or a viscose challis, in fact, to try and get the facing piece and the interfacing piece the same size and pressed and fused together. So I like to make an all-in-one facing piece of fabric. So I'm going to take my piece of interfacing, find the gluey side, and just interface a small piece of fabric. I press it under a press cloth so that any gluey edges that are exposed don't get stuck to the iron. And so now I have a piece of ready interfaced fabric that I can cut the facing out of without the two layers shifting around. Cut out the sleeves, the facing and the front and back pieces. Now you're ready to sew. If you're a complete beginner, then you can check out my other sew along videos. So today I'll be skipping through a little bit quicker than normal for people who can already sew. Let's set up the machine. So I've got my sewing machine with matching thread, and we're going to start with following the instructions. Number 1 is to apply interfacing to our facing pieces, which we already did at the cutting table. So now we can start to assemble the side seams. The pattern calls for some easing stitches along the side of the bust, which should give you a little bit of fullness, but with a stretch fabric, then you should be able to ease that in yourself. So we're not going to do that. If we were using a woven fabric, we definitely would, but because we're using a stretch, we're going to ease the seams in with the stretch. It's going to match underarm to hem. And we have got a little bit of fullness in the one side, so I'm going to keep the bottom of the top lined up. I've pinned the side seam up to the notch, and then you can see there's a little bit of fullness there. The front one is slightly bigger than the back one, but I'm just going to use the stretch of the fabric to ease that in. So we're going to sew the side seams and the shoulder seams. I'm going to finish the edges. You can use a zigzag, or you can use an overlocker. I'm going to use my overlocker today. If you don't have an overlocker, the other sew alongs give you some techniques for finishing edges. It also gives you techniques for sewing with dial sewing machine, where you choose a zigzag stitch to sew with. Today I'm going to use a stretch stitch on my sewing machine, which is a zigzag stitch on its narrowest gauge, which is 0.5 and a length of 3. Okay, let's sew up the top. It doesn't mention it on this pattern, but you can stabilise the shoulders in a really stretchy fabric like this viscose jersey. When you've got a sleeve hanging off the side of your shoulder, sometimes that shoulder can sort of stretch out. So you can add a tape to the shoulder, which stops the shoulder seam stretching out, and I'll show you how to use that. It's a type of interfacing with a thread running through it, a stitch line running through it, and so that's what stops it stretching out. And you need to cut a little piece for each seam allowance. Next you press them on and then zigzag or overlock through all layers. So here's the shoulder now. It's not moving at all. It's overlocked. It's got the stay tape on, and then it's got the seam, but the top is still stretchy, but it can't stretch out lengthways. So you might find if you're using this heavier jersey that's really slinky, that stabilising the shoulders will help your shoulder fit. Next you're going to put the facing unit together. It's quite obvious on this view which is which. So this is the front, this is the back facing, and you need to keep the 1.5 seam allowance that you kept on the shoulder so that the neck facing fits inside the neck hole. I'm going to speed you through all the stages of putting on a facing, because a facing should improve your neckline, not hamper it. there's a couple of things you can do now to finish your neck, and it depends which fabric you're using. So if you're using a woven fabric, then you might wish to turn up the facing and hand stitch it down on the inside, so you have like a neat finish on the inside. If you've got a stretchy fabric, you can overlock it, press the hemband into place, and you can have a top stitch on the outside. So you'll need a matching thread so that you get a black line around here. And you really do need to make sure that you've clipped the curves on the inside so that this curve can come round really gently, because if you sew that, there's an example, if you sew that and you've got a ripple, then that ripple is stuck in there then, because if you use this as your seam line and you haven't got it accurate enough, you're going to get a little ripple. So decide how you're going to finish your neckline. You can hand stitch it down, which is trickier in a jersey fabric because you obviously want to keep some of that stretch, or you can top stitch down, but you need to be nice and accurate and tack that down before you put it under the machine. I'm going to top stitch that down, but I'm going to do all the prep that means I get a really nice neckline. It's time to construct the sleeves. Now this is not in the McCall's pattern, but I learnt this little trick off another pattern and it's absolutely fabulous. If you just turn up with an iron press just your seam allowance for your hem, it makes it really easy to hem your sleeves at the end, because these are set in sleeves, so they're set in a circle. So once you've sewn down there, it's really hard to press that round with the tip of your iron. So if you get the press done first, and then when you sew that side seam, you just open it out, and then the press line should just flop back for you afterwards. So sew the side seams of the sleeves, put that little press on, and I'll show you how it works, and it's amazing. You'll do it on everything. And then we're going to insert the sleeves into the sleeve holes, and we're going to look for the back notch and the front notch to ensure that we put them on the right side of the top. Okay, before we put the sleeve in, you've got a choice to make here. If you're making view C in a woven fabric, you'll need to put easing stitches around the sleeve head between the notches. But if you're making view C in a stretch like I am today, you'll be able to use the stretch to ease in the sleeve. So I need to make sure that I've got the right sleeve for the right side. So I've got the front notch here and the two back notches here, to have the top inside out and the sleeve right side out. And you can see now that little fold that I did before is going to make it so easy to turn up the hem. So I start off with the underarm notch, move round to the front notch, match up to the back notch, and now find the sleeve head. So if you're not using easing stitches, this is the one you need to be a bit more accurate with. So this is the sleeve head notch, and that goes onto the shoulder seam. And now you're going to use the stretch of the fabric to ease that longer seam in with this seam. So I'm going to stretch it and put in a midpoint pin. Then I'm going to put a midpoint pin in this half and quarter it. And again. So you don't need the easing stitches if you're easing in a jersey fabric. You can just ease out the stitches with the stretch. Before you hem your top, it's a good idea to try it on and check if you've used the lengthen or shorten line, that you've achieved the length that you want, and then see how much ease you need across the hips. So it's a really easy fitting top, so it's not tight around your hips like a basic fit tee. So you can stabilize this hem a little bit, which will help you for sewing. I'm going to use some hemming web, which is a very, very thin interfacing. It's really see-through, but it's really good for helping dressmakers to get a stable hem. So some people use it if they can't sew, just to turn up the hem of some trousers, but actually it works as a really good stabilizer. So if you put, it's gluey on both sides, so you put a piece of the interfacing on the hem, turn up the hem and turn again and press, and then you can take your stitch line, and that stabilizer in there will allow for a little bit of stretch, but not for a big stretchy wobbly waistband, which sometimes happens when you're sewing stretch jersey, especially viscose jersey. So use this. You can't put the iron straight on it because it's gluey on both sides. You put it round the bottom, turn once, turn again and press. Using this technique, we'll use a slightly larger hem allowance than is on the pattern. The hem allowance on the pattern is 3.2 centimetres, and this will use 4 centimetres. So make sure that you've tried it on before you use this technique. It's a good idea if you're using a ironing board that you support the weight of the top, because otherwise if the top's draping over the edge of the board, and it'll be really stretching. So make sure that the top is supported on the ironing board. So the hemming web is attached. So now I can just turn up the hem, and it's all measured out for me at 4 centimetres. And it's not so sloppy. I know that I can get really good matches on my seams. And now I can use my foot to guide me along the edge of the hem. Just get a superb hem. You still get a little bit of stretch in it, but from the right side, no ripples and completely firm. So this is view C. It's got a different neckline. It's much more of a scooped out. I had view F on before. This is view C. It's short sleeved and I sized down. So the previous one I had was a medium, and this is a small, and it is a much better fit across the shoulders. I don't feel like I'm sort of just pulling it up all the time. This one has got the facing sewn down, but you can just have the facing folded in and attach them across the shoulders. And the back fit is much better. It's not sort of slopping into a V shape at the back. And this is the Minerva exclusive viscose jersey knit. Really slinky, nice to wear, really smooth, and a really vibrant print. I hope that's piqued your interest in McCall's 7322, and will encourage you to take a look at our new exclusive fabric ranges. This is the viscose jersey, and the one behind is the viscose chalet, which is also suitable for this pattern. All the products that I've used are listed below, so you can check out any of those on our website. and we would love you to make a profile for yourself and show us your makes from this pattern. Show us what fabric you chose, what sizing you chose, and how it fits your body. You don't have to take professional photographs, just a picture of you in your garden is absolutely fabulous. Do come back again for more sew-alongs, tips and techniques on Minerva TV.